Ahoy! New World have announced Season 7, Season of Conquerors, and there are some interesting changes in here, some good changes, but also some very questionable new artifacts especially, that I want to talk about a little bit today. And we're going to go through that in chronological order, or rather in the order that they're discussing it. But we're going to begin here with the date itself. This is going to happen on January 21st, 2025, so exactly 1 month from now, which honestly is somewhat surprising to me because based on how they were talking about this earlier, I was expecting a little bit of a delay to the season. I was expecting it to not exactly come after 3 months, and I think this should be pretty much about 3 months now. So I'm happy with this outcome at least, so we are starting relatively early in the new year. We don't have to wait for too long, but the season itself, it's highly debated. The biggest thing in this new season will be the new format of seasonal worlds, where you can play a fresh character with unique modifiers, so to speak, for these worlds. And in this case, there will be a PvP flag for everyone starting at level 15, so forced PvP. In addition to that, you can discover new resources and gear with powerful perks, but beware, these items drop upon death, and so even the crafting process for that will have some sort of drop mechanic, so the resources that you get in order to craft this better gear may drop, and there's also some durability on these items, so they don't last forever apparently. And at the end of the season, seasonal worlds will close and players can transfer their characters to a permanent world of their choice. Now, I'm expecting that we won't be able to take any of the items over that are specifically for these servers, but what I am expecting is that we can likely keep the cosmetics that we got there and turn them into transmogs, for example, and from what we've seen, some of these skins might look pretty cool. We're getting a new Outpost Rush map called Coral Divide, but we only get a preview weekend for this, so we won't be able to play this permanently yet. I'm a bit confused by the name because it sounds like some aquatic theme based on the corals. I'm not sure how that would work with New World's current theme, so we'll have to wait and see in that regard. What they're saying here is that there will be a central trench dividing the battlefield and housing NPCs. You can build bridges to create new pathways, opening up strategic opportunities for your team. Now, what I instantly don't like about that is that this sounds like PvE will be even more important on this map than the current one, because on one hand you have the NPCs in the middle apparently, and on the other hand you have the bridges that you may want to build, which is probably going to be very beneficial. It's probably use the usual resources that you need to build just about anything in OPR. I was hoping that they'd move further away from the PvE component of OPR because we don't really have enough pure PvP modes in New World that are accessible to everyone, unless you're just playing 3v3s. So I don't like that aspect, but other than that, I just want to see what this map looks like in general, if it's something that's interestingly designed, and if maybe this trench in the middle could also be an interesting opportunity for fighting, maybe something where ranged can't snipe down as easily because there's kind of this trench going down and you can kind of surprise attack as a melee or something like that. We'll have to see. We're getting the M3 expedition upgrades. Mutations will be unified across all of the ones that are currently active at the same time, so that you can just use the same loadout or the same gems for all of them each week. And along with that, it is now possible to queue for M3 in the activity finder. They also upgrade the rewards. They say conquer challenges and collect better loot than ever before. This I wish we would get some more details on, because for now we don't know if M3s are going to be worth it still, or what the conditions are. So think, for example, if M3s provide better rewards, then they may be worth playing, but if those rewards are tied to getting gold in the expedition, then people may still not play them because it's just not that likely to get M3 gold with a random group. So yeah, it's a bit of a question mark, I would say, overall, in what direction they're going to take this, and we just need more information. Along with that, there are also some bug fixes for Expedition, specifically for AI movement, interactions with Nereid and Windchill. They fixed an issue for the targeting of the Void Destroyer in Tempest Heart, and they improved mechanics and enemy interactions across all expeditions. How much that will be impactful is another question. Now let's talk about the new artifacts. Some of them, they already stated how we're going to get them. For most of them, they didn't, but they're a bit vague with that part. We'll get to that in a second. For the first one, we have the Void Gauntlet. It's called Fracture. This makes you heal 100% more health and deal 50% more damage with Essence Rupture. They say it's unlocked by defeating the Tribunal Ice Mammoth, Ipomea, and 20 frozen Varangian guards in the Glacial Challenge. So these are actually the unlocks for the perks, I'm pretty sure, and you don't have to kill all of these just to get the drop. So that part is a bit weird, and it's worded weirdly and differently on different items here. But this is built around Essence Rupture. It sounds like it's only for yourself, so it's not something that a healer could just chuck on, unless it isn't. But it could be interesting to just somehow make it more viable to implement Essence Rupture into a lifesteal focused build, for example, a leech focused build. Not my preferred ability, though, I will say that. I think like, as someone who likes Void Blade or generally likes the left tree, and then if I'm choosing something from the right tree, it's going to be Tether, it's going to be Orb, it's not going to be Essence Rupture most of the time, except in specific PvE situations. So I'm not entirely sure if this will fill a niche yet, but it's definitely one of the more interesting ones where it at least creates a niche with the artifact, and I like that. I think that part is great. For the Life Staff, we have Heketa, I'm assuming, maybe Heseta. Grant minus 30% damage absorption with Light Touch after casting a Life Staff ability. I was trying to figure out what Light Touch is. I think Light Touch is just the perk itself that grants you this absorption, unless I couldn't find it. And then you complete the Heketa Canyon questline to unlock this. This sounds extremely strong. If this is really an outright 30% damage absorption just after casting a Life Staff ability, that would be absolutely insane. Unless this is some like mistranslation into saying like Light's Embrace actually, but I don't think so, just based on how it's worded here. I'm not sure, but I don't think that's what it means. So either way, if you're able to easily get 30% damage absorption of all things, which is basically what you have on gems, so a very, very strong effect, better than Fortify. That sounds like it would be mandatory for every healer, unless the perks on the Life Staff are completely terrible and make it completely unusable. So very curious about that one and how that's going to work balance-wise, because this is almost like taking a Life Staff from like a light armor level to a heavy armor level, if this is like both physical and elemental. Very, very hard to like measure how strong this is, because like we don't really use these amounts of absorption anymore, because almost everything is Fortify at this point. It used to be different, but like it really, I think, is mostly gems nowadays that have this effect in the first place. Sounds insanely strong. If you I don't know, if you have a Fortifying Sacred on top of that, you just, I mean, you're not already not dying as a healer in like a small scale scenario in the first place. But this is like, even in wars or something, I think this would be extremely strong. The Ice Gauntlet is Otzi, or probably reference to Ötzi here. Inflict Frostburn by breaking Entomb, slowing enemies and dealing damage over time. Found in the Icewood Caverns by defeating the Frostborn Howler. This one I think is once again an interesting niche one. I don't know in what kind of situation this is most effective, because obviously you are using Entomb defensively most of the time. But it could be that there is a playstyle for this somewhere. You could think like, once upon a time we used to have heavy bruisers with VGIG that would be able to engage quite heavily, and we're seeing like somewhat of a comeback of playstyles like that. So maybe for them this extra damage on Entomb could be interesting in the slow, especially. It's just providing extra utility as well. Maybe some nice way to stack a hard rune as well. But then obviously you sacrifice Entomb to get this effect, or you're already using Entomb defensively and it's kind of like a last Hail Mary. So again, niche, but somewhat interesting. For most players, I think Deep Freeze is more interesting still in comparison. But that's also because Deep Freeze used to be niche, because it used to be a Wind Chill artifact, and then they changed that because people complained too much. The Fire Staff gets Burnatator. Sacrifice damage for increased burn effects, 15% over 5 seconds. Collect Ember Flames in Scorched Dunes. This one I am just going to assume it's just going to be very strong, because Fire Staff gets so much of its actual damage from burns already. So if the damage sacrifice here is smaller than the additional damage over time you're getting, I see this having a lot of value, and different from Inferno, this would work from range. So I think this could be nice. Has obvious competition and other offhand artifacts, but in case of the Fire Staff, I would say, which is often used with the Ice Gauntlet, there could be a pretty solid value in this. The bow is Aconite, deal 15% more damage to poisoned enemies. Unlock via the Venom questline in Jungle Wilds. Now, Aconite doesn't sound that great at first glance, because you really should be able to have similar damage or more damage from running either Finisher or Life Taker. But it could be, because originally I was thinking that really you're just getting this increase from Poison Shot, and that kind of makes it pointless. But it could be, theoretically, that this is also applied by Nature Dots, which would mean that it's applied by the Rune Glass, the Amber Rune Glass. If that is the case, it could be like an offhand bow that's used in a similar way to how Finisher is used as an offhand rapier most of the time. So maybe there's some potential there. Maybe that's interesting, and maybe that gives you some more flexibility in what else you can run with a bow. You're not too much like locked into the same two artifacts. You could, for example, run it maybe with a spear without needing to run a spear artifact along with that. Say, okay, I want to have the bow as the artifact here, but I also want to run a spear. I don't want to go into the Boltcaster path, but I'm going to do a Nature Gem on my spear, and that will be the playstyle. That could be interesting. That could be cool. Question is, will it actually work with the Rune Glass, or will it literally just be actual poison? But then again, the game doesn't really have anything to differ between poison and nature damage, I think, so it might just be nature dots too. Could be cool. For the rapier, we're getting Dogord's Blade. Apply stacking burn effects with heavy melee attacks. Defeat Dogord in the volcanic lair to earn Lava Tip. I'm assuming Lava Tip may have been the original name, and that, or it's a resource or something, but either way, this is weird. I thought that we would maybe get something that makes Finisher just a little bit less interesting. Maybe something that either is just for an evade rapier build in an aggressive way. I don't think that needs more defensive tools. Or something that's just generally somehow effective in PvP, or makes some of the rapier abilities more effective in PvP. Instead, we're getting something that tries to force us into using heavy attacks. None of the current rapier builds are anywhere close to being built around heavy attacks, and none of the perks really facilitate it. I guess you can maybe do a riposte into a heavy attack, but that's just about where it ends. And then we kind of get a similar situation to the spear artifacts that are for some reason both focused on heavy attacks to some degree, where it's always, yeah, okay, so you have to run it with sweep in order to use the follow-up attack, which is your only heavy attack that you're using, and that is going to benefit, but for everything else it's kind of irrelevant. And that's no different with rapier. They really only set this up with riposte, unless I'm overlooking something, and just for that it feels too niche and not worth it in my eyes. I don't think it's worth playing around that unless the damage is absolutely insane. So not the biggest fan of that one. The new earring is called Justice. Automatically recharge healing potions after 20 hits with a 90 seconds cooldown. Complete the Alchemist Trials in the Forbidden Labs. I think conceptually this is interesting, but the 90 seconds cooldown makes it somewhat more ineffective, especially when Endless Thirst already fulfills a similar function in many ways. You have the new chest piece that also has a potion restore in another way. I don't really know if I would get that much value out of it. It could work well though if it generally has solid perks, and if you're someone who doesn't really need any other like jewelry artifact, you're just thinking, okay, maybe I can slot this just to get the nice perks, and then on top of that I occasionally get an extra healing potion. Could be okay for that, could be decent for tankier builds through that. Since 2 pots in a 90 seconds cooldown might just be enough for you if you're very tanky. So I don't think this is horrible. I don't think it's particularly interesting, but it's something that might be just alright, might be decent, might be usable. New musket is Shrapnel. Causes enemies to bleed on headshot. Earn this by defeating the War Machine Captain in the Ashen Barracks. This one I don't really know. This is just basically a Keenly Jag that only works on headshots and not on other crits. That's it. It might stack with Keenly Jagged. If it's a separate bleed, that could be interesting. So you get like a double bleed when hitting someone. But I'm not a fan of that either, just because I think that ranged weapons shouldn't have more dot damage. Like, it's doubled up, but we don't really should go further in a direction of ranged having more and more dots, because that's already an overwhelming amount of many ranged weapons damage. A weirdly high amount for a game like this, where generally in melee you get significantly less damage over time with most builds. Not all builds, but most builds. And then in range you have dots on the bow, you have dots on the musket, you have dots on the fire staff, and you slot more and more dots on them, and now there's another dot here, and we have the fire staff with the new dot perks. Just, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm kind of hoping that maybe they're overhauling this musket. So far, by the way, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a PTR. They haven't said anything about that, at least, and haven't mentioned it here. So I don't know if we'll have any chance to test the artifacts beforehand. I'm not expecting it. What is interesting here is that we're seeing various trials or various locations that are mentioned in quest lines that are, as far as I'm aware, not in the game yet, or at least couldn't find them. And I'm not sure what that means, if we're getting anything specific for that in the new season. I could imagine that maybe we're going to continue the season story quest line. They haven't mentioned it, but it would make sense with all of these quests and specific locations. Usually they create a few new locations for those quest lines. We're also seeing the repeat of a few events. We're seeing Siege of Sulphur again, Legacy of Crassus, and Rabbit's Revenge. Legacy of Crassus in particular has up-leveled rewards, so I'm assuming the other ones do too. There's going to be a new season pass, Hersign themed, and there are going to be 2 artifacts on the free track, apparently. It says Otzi and Heketa are going to be on there, but they also mentioned 2 other locations up above, so I'm assuming that you might be able to get them on the track first, and these other locations are where you can get them afterwards. That's my guess, at least, because that's how they normally handle it as well, not only that at this point they're assigning the locations already beforehand. The transmog tokens will be included here as well. I'm not sure how many though, maybe 2, because it says tokens, multiple. And then in the premium track, you also get 2 new emotes and 4 transmog tokens and some other stuff. There are some general fixes that I'm not going to go through in detail, but there are some very important changes to OPR. Updated the shop offerings in OPR, including a new buildable wall for adding cover, regen potions, and cleansing elixirs. I think this will shift the OPR meta quite drastically. The buildable wall especially sounds very interesting, because one of the biggest issues in OPR is a lack of cover. Question, of course, is how long will a wall last? How much health does it have? How easily is it destroyed? But if this is like somewhat effective, this could be very strong. Again, I don't like that it probably adds more PvE in order to farm for that, but I do like the fact that there might be walls that you can put down and kind of strategically block off range spam. Additionally, cleansing elixir is fantastic. I primarily like this not so much because we're getting them in OPR. I think it's okay, that's nice, that's good. But the main point here is that it helps people practice for wars. If you have cleansing elixirs in OPRs, then you can practice using them effectively, timing them right, in order to then effectively use them in wars, which makes the transition much easier from an OPR player to a war player, because you're starting on the same foundation. They also improved the skill-based matchmaking in OPR to be based on your personal ranking in the match instead of just wins and losses. This could have a very funny side effect, because the easiest way to get a high rank in OPR is by PvEing or by being a healer, which could mean that all of a sudden there's a certain OPR high-level meta where the matches are actually very boring and weird, because they're full of healers and Bob the Builders. And then if you go down a little bit in rating to like the high rating players that are actually playing PvP and fighting and are not healers, and there's kind of like a second league that is full of people that are just fighting and not as many healers and no PvEing. So that could lead to some funny results, but I'm not sure how much that will be the case. Either way, maybe a good shift, maybe not. They also cleaned up the invisible collision in the original OPR map to allow for more traversal options. This would be concerning because it means that there are more hiding spots for snipers again, especially because you can climb on the rocks and stuff, but it's kind of probably offset by the ability to add cover now with a buildable wall. So again, depending on how much health that has, that may be offset. All in all, I don't think this is everything in the new season. Again, I think at least some season quest line seems to be involved there for the new locations and everything. So we'll probably see some more. This is more of a basic overview, but so far I like what we're getting for the most part. Artifacts are a bit of a hit or miss. What I will say is that I don't think this will massively keep the game alive, afloat, because I think for many people this is just not enough for now. I think the PvP servers are going to be very, very interesting for people who are interested in that kind of stuff, but they're also going to be, there's going to be a lot of griefing, there's going to be a lot of large companies taking over space and making it unfun for others and all kinds of things like that. So it is definitely something that I personally will probably enjoy, but I know a lot of other people might not be nearly as interested in, so we'll have to see how things go in that regard. I'll of course keep you updated, so consider subscribing and clicking the bell if you're interested in more New World news. And if you want to hear more about Path of Exile 2, then feel free to check out my other channel. I will link that right here. If you want to support me further and get early trading tips, you can do so on my Patreon. Thanks to all my patrons who already do that, and thank you for watching. And at this point, I'm probably going to wish you a Merry Christmas already, because I don't know if I get another video out before then. I'm going to have a bit of a holiday as well. Enjoy the time with your family if you're celebrating it, and Happy New Year too, but might hear from you before that. SLOTH, out.